Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Annette Billingsley, Senior Vice President and Division Head for Union Bank.
Thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. It's just such a pleasure to be here today. Union Bank is very proud to be a supporter of today's Outlook Conference, and we're also very proud to be a member of the Bay Area Council. With roots in California that go back more than a century and a half, Union Bank is always thinking big about how best to serve our customers. So on behalf of Union Bank, I'm pleased to introduce our next panel of distinguished speakers who will talk about a topic of profound importance to California: energy. I'm honored first to welcome State Senator Alex Padilla, who will moderate today's talk. Senator Padilla was first elected to the Senate in 2006 and won re-election in 2010. A graduate of MIT in mechanical engineering, Senator Padilla is chair of the Senate Energy, Utilities, and Communications Committee. On our panel is Geisha Williams, who is Executive Vice President in charge of all aspects of electric distribution, transmission, and substation operations for San Francisco-based PG&E, one of the nation's largest utilities, serving 15 million customers in Northern California and Central California as well. Next, we have Ron Sagi, who is Chairman, President, and CEO of Echelon, a world leader in innovative energy control systems whose technology is embedded in more than 100 million devices, 35 million homes, and 300,000 buildings around the globe. Our final panelist is Paul Nahi, who is President and CEO of Enphase Energy, a Silicon Valley-based company whose revolutionary technologies are focused on dramatically increasing the performance, intelligence, and reliability of solar energy systems. So thank you, and please enjoy today's panel. Thank you.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Alex Padilla, as was recently introduced, Chairman of the Senate Committee on Energy, Utilities, and Communications. We're going to start off with letting the panelists do sort of a couple of minutes of opening remarks before we really have some fun with some questions that we're ready to tee up and motivate the conversation here. So let's start with Geisha Williams from PG&E.
Great. So as I thought about this conference and the topic being, about thinking big, I thought about what am I thinking big about these days at PG&E, and particularly in the electric side of the house. And I would say before I answer that, when you think about energy at PG&E, we think about it from the perspective of how do we best serve our customers. So everything we do is first focused on safe, reliable, and affordable service to our customers. So when I think big, everything will always come back to that. So here are some of the things that are important to us. First, looking at the future of the energy supply here in California. What will that look like? What will that be in 2020, in 2030, and in 2040? And when you think about what that could be, what are the specific plans or what are the specific things we need to be doing today to prepare ourselves for an energy future of the future, if you will? What are the investments that are necessary? What about technology? What about the systems and different sort of things that are necessary to kind of build the path towards that? So we think about that a lot because it's important. We also think about the economic vitality of the state. We're all making some pretty significant investments in the infrastructure, upgrading, modernizing our infrastructure. What a great opportunity to leverage that work to at the same time create jobs, create some productivity, create a little bit of a vitality back to the communities that we serve, and hopefully bring businesses back to California or keep businesses here. And we also think about our customers. They've got so much more information at their fingertips today in terms of being engaged with the energy choices that they make. So how do we, as we think about the future, help them? How do we evolve our relationship to help them navigate through the choices that they have to make? So we think about these things and think about the future quite a bit. But thinking about the future is a first step. We think we also need to act now. We have to act big now. So we've begun. We're not waiting. We've begun to actually reinvent, if you will, or modernize our infrastructure, including a commitment to invest $1.2 billion in San Francisco to upgrade our power lines, to upgrade our pipeline, to upgrade the infrastructure that serves this city. It's going to create jobs. We think it's going to be a terrific thing. It'll end up being with safer, more reliable service for our customers. So we're really excited about it. And at the same time, as we think about the future and technology, we're making investments in technology today. We're acting big on that. One of the things that we're really excited about is smart grid technology. So you've heard about smart meters, I'm sure, but we're also implementing something called smart switches. And these smart switches are pretty cool. They automate these circuits so that should there be an outage, should there be a problem on the circuit, these switches have the ability, without human intervention, to determine where the problem is, isolate it, block power going to it, reroute power, and keep customers online, keep them in service, without them even having known that there was a power interruption, to most of the circuit. And then isolates where the problem is to just a few, maybe 100 customers or so, giving us insights of where the problem is and helping us get to it that much sooner. So for us, it's about thinking about the future, but acting big now.
Right, and that's just scratching the surface. You know, in the legislature, we deal with a lot of issues, 120 legislators between the two houses, and then the previous speaker who will sign or veto our bills at the end of the year. And I always remind my colleagues, you know, if it was easy, it'd be done already, whether it was in health, in education, in energy, environmental concerns, et cetera. And so clearly, you're in the thick of it.
Yep.
And PG&E has a long-standing history here in Northern California. It's evolving, given the times, given technology, given policy mandates, and we have two panelists here that are in the thick of the transition that we're all seeking to achieve, not just to alternative and cleaner sources of energy, but one that leads towards energy independence, environmental gains. Ron, let's hear from you next.
Great. Well, it's terrific to be here this afternoon. We were joking backstage that we have to make energy as funny as social media. So we're gonna work hard.
With that.
We're gonna work hard to do that. But
MC Segi, please take it over.
yeah, MC Segi, right? Exactly. So actually, Geisha did a great job of describing what we do when she talked about smart switches. So. We've had the dream of smart energy at Echelon for 25 years. We're a Silicon Valley company, and our vision was pretty simple, although we didn't describe it this way back then, but it's bringing the benefits of the internet to all devices on Earth, so that light switches and lights and heating systems and thermostats and pool pumps can all be smart. So not only can they communicate and coordinate with one another to save energy, you walk in your house, the sensor knows you're home, the lights come up, the heat goes up, you leave the room, goes back down again, and so on. That's the dream we have, that's the technology we have, but even beyond that, all of these devices communicating dynamically with PG&E, so the pool pump knows that this is not a good time in the middle of the day to go on because Geisha's got a very expensive power plant online because it's peak load, but why don't you go on at midnight when we're at base load and electricity is very cheap. So that's the Echelon dream. It's taken a little longer than we had envisioned. We could talk about that, but we're optimistic that we're right on the cusp of this dream becoming a reality.
And Paul?
Sure. So Enphase Energy is a global supplier of inverters to the solar industry. An inverter is just a necessary piece of equipment in any solar environment. And I think in the spirit of thinking big, there are kind of three avenues that we would look at. And I think it mirrors a little bit what Geisha and Ron were talking about. Number one, we want to provide lower cost energy to our customers. We want to provide more jobs, not just for Californians, but for Americans in general. And then finally, we want to do this in such a way that creates a cleaner, more sustainable planet. And for Enphase, we've adopted a very technology-heavy approach to this. We currently have invested, we are investing a tremendous amount in semiconductor development, in software, mechanical engineering, system-level engineering. And we're doing all of this to make solar very simple and more efficient. And by making it simpler and by making it more efficient, we can, number one, by definition, reduce utility bills. because we're generating more energy with a less expensive system. By making it simpler, we can engage a lot more Americans in the solar industry. There have been a lot of challenges to bring people from different trades into solar because some of the specialization required, a lot of that goes away with some of Enphase's products. And as a result, you have people from different trades and different parts of the workforce who can participate in everything from obviously what Enphase does in terms of system design, all the way through installation, customer service, and operations and maintenance. And by doing this, by providing lower cost energy and by engaging a larger part of America in this, we will, by definition, create a cleaner, safer planet and one that has a consistent, sustainable, renewable energy supply.
So clearly, three leaders of the industry that are thinking big. You know, I'm reminded of the political quote by Robert F. Kennedy, who said, some people see the world as it is and ask themselves why. I see the world as it could be and ask myself, why not? So these individuals are seeing the future of energy, its impact on sustaining a strong economy, and asking themselves, you know, why not? But the why not isn't really the question. It's how do we get there? One of the challenges that we have on a policy front, and I'm going to invite the panelists to speak from a technical perspective, is we're not starting from scratch. We're not building a city, a state, or an economy from scratch. We're starting with what is and transitioning towards these alternative and cleaner fuels, again, from an energy independence argument or economic job creation point of view, environmental benefits, et cetera. So talk to me about the transition and how we can quickly get to where we want to go.
Well, to me, it's a great question because, I read this somewhere, so I'm not going to take credit for this original thought, but it would be like, imagine if you were trying to use your rotary phone to download a YouTube video. In essence, that's kind of the challenge that we have with the energy infrastructure, the electric energy infrastructure. You have an infrastructure that was largely built 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, and it's, it's somewhat dated. A lot of the equipment is reaching its end of life, and the challenge is how do we upgrade it and maintain it? So again, we go back to safe and reliable and affordable service to our customers. But how do we do that with the future in mind so that the systems that we put in place to make changes, for example, as we go from an electromechanical relay to a digital relay, how do we make sure that the relays that we're putting in place are compatible with future state type of infrastructure or technology? And it's not always easy because you're taking a bet. You're saying, I am believing that the infrastructure I'm putting in place today will be compatible with infrastructure that's yet to be designed. And it's a little bit of a challenge. None of us wants to bet on Betamax. We all want to make sure that we make the choice for the VCR or whatever. And so it is a little bit of a challenge. Our approach is proven technology, look at the different options that are available out there, test it, put it in a pilot type of format, and then begin small-scale pilots to see how well it integrates with the current stuff that you have, while at the same time taking an opportunity to upgrade along the way.
So I like to think in terms of analogies, and that's why I think in terms of, how do we extend the internet to, light switches and whatnot, and thinking back to how did the internet get started and how can public policy help? And I think there's two things that are important. One, which the state of California is already doing, and that's create demand for this new technology. And things like Title 24, which is mandating lighting efficiency in California, and more specifically mandating controls so that the example I gave before actually becomes reality. So that certainly is one step. And if you look back the early days of the internet, it was the government that put together the demand for the backbone. The second, though, I think still needs to be done, which is demanding open standard protocols, so that we build open systems that applications can be built on top of. We want energy to be managed the same way that social media applications are created by entrepreneurs all over Silicon Valley and all over the world. Well, the way that happened is all layers of the internet were open. I could connect to it easily. I could get the data. I could build the application on top of it. And today, that's just not the case in my world. PG&E has a smart meter, but I can't connect to it and get the data so I could build an application that could turn my lights on and off based on how much electricity I'm using right now. All of the competitors that build thermostats and whatnot have closed proprietary systems, so it's why your lighting system and your security system and so on can't talk to one another. And this is an area where I think the government is going to have to be a little more active in specifying how we connect to these electrical devices with open standards the same way they did in the 80s with the internet.
You know, I think Geisha is really underplaying the challenge of her job. It is really tremendous. It's basically repairing a car while it's on the freeway going 60 miles an hour. And unfortunately,
in reverse.
In reverse, right. And unfortunately, my job is to make Geisha's job harder.
Thanks.
Yeah. The reality of solar today is that there are 250,000 solar homes in the U.S. There are 70 million homes in the U.S. There's going to be 1 million new homes built this year. Today, the penetration of solar is incredibly small, maybe 0.3% penetration in the continental U.S. And that's today when solar is about $4.50 a watt. Well, we know, if we look to Germany, that solar in Germany is right now maybe $2.25 a watt. We know that solar is going to come down. We have visibility to $2 a watt solar in the U.S. sooner than people think. Now, the reason people at $4.50 a watt are choosing solar in such rapid number today is because it is cheaper than utility energy. I'd love to say that it's altruistic, it's holistic, it's people wanting to save the planet. The reality is that that is not the case for solar anymore. It's actually good news because the demand creation based on saving money is going to be a lot greater than relying on people's better nature. But it does mean that that demand is going to be explosive. So the question I think the question that we all face right now is, and is exactly what Geisha was saying, is how do you prepare for a grid that doesn't have 0.3% distributed generation, but that has 3% distributed generation, 30% distributed generation? Betting against technology is generally not a good idea, and there is a tremendous amount of inertia, a tremendous amount of R&D that's going into solar right now to reduce costs, to increase efficiency, to solve the O&M. In order for us to make this happen in a way that is relatively painless, it's going to require, I think, a very deep cooperation between companies like PG&E and the solar industry, so that we could roll this out in a way that benefits the ratepayer, that recognizes and leverages the tremendous benefit that the utilities provide, and does this in a way that allows us to rapidly develop and encourage a new source of energy.
So at the end of the day, the challenge for policymakers, for utilities, is to try to, as closely as possible, match the supply with the energy demand. And as we're seeing with technology, thanks to you two gentlemen and many others, we're introducing a lot of new variables along the way with significant factors in between. We've talked, and I think most people are increasingly aware of alternative sources of energy, whether it's just for the purpose of being renewable or cleaner or just alternative from a source standpoint. Just last November, the voters of the state voted in Prop 39 to infuse billions of dollars more over the next several years into energy efficiency. That's also part of this equation of matching supply, demand, and a system that's as effective and as efficient and equitable as possible. We know that the Department of Energy and the private sector is infusing a lot of investment into research on energy storage. So just these three big examples that add to what we've talked about so far on transitioning the energy infrastructure we have today to the energy systems of the future. What else do you foresee on the horizon or beyond, either for good or for bad, as challenges in this respect?
I think storage, and you've already mentioned it, but I think storage is sort of the next big thing. As we have more and more renewables, it's a good thing, but they're intermittent. So you only have solar-generated power during the day. You only have typically wind-generated power during the night. So what do? You can't totally withdraw your traditional generation resources because solar's not there when the sun's not shining. So we need some kind of in between sort of power source, and I think that's where storage comes in. Now today we had a ribbon cutting at PG&E in San Jose, announcing or launching a 4 megawatt battery that we put at the end of one of our lines, where we're actually testing to see how well it works with renewable energy sources that are already on that circuit, but trying to learn better about that sort of interplay between immediate demand and immediate supply when in fact some of these renewable sources go offline. So I think this whole area of storage is one that is very intriguing. It's one that I think we need to pay very close attention to. Today, I would say the chemistry of the battery still needs some work. It's not quite, I think, what it needs to be. And the costs are not quite as competitive as they need to be as well. But with all new emerging technologies, we know that once you make investments and there's a lot of attention on it, costs drop rapidly. So we're very intrigued by that.
And I would just echo what Paul said is we can't overstate the challenge of getting this done. The electric grid, I like to joke, is probably the one thing that was invented more than 100 years ago that looks exactly the same today as it did back then. The auto engine doesn't, the computer engine, and so on. So transforming that from kind of a one-way, the power goes from Moss Landing to my house, to what you described, is going to require the dramatic interplay of technologies from you, from us, and just getting that done is profound.
Yeah, I would echo that. I think that I would completely agree with the two panelists and say that storage is probably the #1 single technology that needs a leap in innovation. Solar right now still has a long way to go, but it's on a fairly linear path. There's been a lot of money that's been invested in it. There is still a lot of innovation to go, but I think you're going to see the innovation that occurs a bit more marginal. Battery chemistry needs a breakthrough. And I would say that once you have that battery, exactly for the reasons that Geisha said, renewables by definition are going to be intermittent. You have to account for that. But once you have the battery, then you need a way to manage all energy. And you need to manage it at the grid level. You need to manage it at the consumer level. There needs to be, what Ron was talking about, you need to be able to control when you turn things on and off. People need to, and I think as time goes on, as more and more people adopt their own energy generation, adopt a more intelligent energy system within their house, they will be able to control that and recognize that that has a direct financial impact on them and would reduce the stress on the grid.
Yeah, we shouldn't underestimate the power of just conservation. Title 24, I mean, in California, 30% of the energy goes to, lighting things. And with Title 24, we should be able to cut that by 30%, without anybody, being in the dark. So we're talking about almost a 10% reduction in demand just by deploying technologies that are readily available today.
In the time that remains, let me try to shoehorn in 2 more questions. One is this. In the Capitol, we too often fall into the trap of talking about energy as just the electricity grid, when if you really stop and think, it's what moves our vehicles, and is it gasoline, or are we transitioning to other sources of energy for the transportation sector? It could be at the micro level, consumer electronics. My home in Southern California was built in 1949. It wasn't built for the PC and the microwave and the refrigerators that we have to, et cetera, et cetera. So from that broader perspective, other comments or observations on energy and innovation?
I think electrification is a real opportunity. So why do I say that? Today, PG&E's portfolio of generation is 60% carbon-free, 60%. So if you're able to take a combustion engine and make it into an electric engine, if you will, you are reducing tremendous amounts of carbon in the air. And so we think that is a real positive part of our future. And one of our challenges is how do we help our customers? How do we make sure we have charging stations where they need to be? How do you have the right rate structure so that you're not paying an undue charge when you get to that last tier, right, that tier 4? What do we need to do on the rate structure? What do we need to do in the charging station perspective of it? And how do we work with the manufacturers to some degree to continue to drive the price of vehicles down?
And I would only add, once we all have electric cars and we come home at 6 o'clock at night and plug them in, how do we keep the grid from going poof?
Right.
Exactly.
Right? So we got to do all that other stuff too, but I
And
agree with Geisha.
we'll have another panel maybe in a future gathering that'll discuss the potentials for the next generation of apps once our smartphone batteries last a lot longer. We have a few more minutes left, and I wanted to make sure to ask you, I guess, either to grade ourselves or maybe to grade me and my colleagues. California is proud of its reputation as a policy leader when it comes to clean energy and the environment. And we've been sort of reiterating that for years and years and years now. But we know, Texas has more wind than California. We know what's happening in Germany, in China, and elsewhere around the world. Do we still deserve that title of being a national or if not a global leader in this? And if we do, why do you think so? And if not, how do we reclaim it?
Well, I'll start with this. So I think, as an example, the policy that Governor Schwarzenegger had installed with the California Solar Initiative is an example of tremendous success. It did exactly what it was supposed to do, which was encourage more solar. It created jobs. It built companies within California to support that. And in my opinion, most importantly, it ended. I think the biggest problem, and I think the way we look at energy today, is that it will forever be subsidized. And when you're looking at energy policy, I think that there's a sense that to create equilibrium, we should subsidize renewables to the same rate that, frankly, the other forms of energy are being subsidized today. I think that's going in the wrong direction. I think we've coddled some of the fossil fuel energies enough by trying to create an equilibrium by leveraging us up, by leveraging renewables up to compete, means that now we have to compete in Sacramento or in DC. We're spending money on policy, not on product. We're not able to spend as much money on customer service because we're focused on legislation. What I think I'd like to, what we want to see, and what I think that all of us can do better at, is looking at both the real direct and indirect subsidies afforded to the fossil fuels. So don't solve the problem by continuing to subsidize renewables. Let those subsidies end, but at the same time, build an equal playing field by letting the other subsidies end, and importantly, imposing on fossil fuel generation the necessary cost associated with the negative externalities that are built into that. The IMF came out with a report saying that in 2011, there were about $480 billion, almost $500 billion in direct subsidies to oil, gas, electricity, coal, and $1.4 trillion associated to the externalities associated with climate change and health and all the rest. If we could create an equilibrium that taxes carbon and removes the existing subsidies for traditional fossil fuels and leaves renewables alone, I think we'll let the market dictate prices. And in that environment, I'm very confident that renewables will take a very dominant role.
So it sounds like it's not an A, B, or C, it's an incomplete.
It's an incomplete. It's on the way.
And I would just make I guess a related point. First of all, I love what we're doing in California, and I think we sell all over the world, and we are very much at the forefront. I think, unfortunately, at the federal level, we don't have anywhere near as coherent leadership, and as a result, here in the United States, from our perspective as a technology provider, we face an unbelievably balkanized regulatory situation, which makes it almost impossible to get any economies of scale in deploying here in the U.S., and as a consequence, we sell 70% of our technology outside of the U.S. to places like Denmark that have very aggressive, national level commitments. Even China, very aggressive national level commitment to modernizing. So I would only hope that California will become more of a bellwether, and the federal government will take a more active role.
Sounds like Ron is going to keep me after school. Geisha.
And I would say that we do deserve that reputation of being a leader. I mean, when you look at our energy efficiency, the work that the whole state has done really on reducing carbon-emitting generators, the work we've done with the solar initiative, with demand response. You just have to drive down the road and look at all the homes with solar rooftops. I think we really are at the forefront. I think to stay at the forefront, though, we need to demonstrate and achieve really positive results. This is a complicated field, as we've already talked about. It's not particularly easy to sort of introduce all of these different generation sources and integrate it seamlessly into the grid. And I think the proof will be in the pudding in terms of what kind of leader we are in the future, depending on what level of success we achieve. So if the grid is stable and we don't have brownouts and it works, number one, check it, good. If our customers' costs don't go through the roof, good, check it off. We do those things safely and securely, I think that we can declare victory.
I couldn't have summed it up better myself. Thank you to the three of you.
Thank
This
you.
concludes our panel.